Commander Vrask's clawed feet clicked against the polished obsidian floor of the Grand Council chamber, each step deliberate and measured. He enjoyed how the assembled representatives from 100 soft-world species seemed to shrink back as he passed, their evolutionary instincts recognizing an apex predator in their midst. The Drezak Imperium thanks the Council for this opportunity to share our latest planetary defense innovations, Vrask announced, his translator modulating his natural hissing speech into something the weaker species could comprehend without activating their flight responses. Behind him, the massive holographic display flickered to life, showcasing the hellscape that was Kaldar. Rivers of liquid sulfur cut through jagged black mountains, while the double suns scorched the landscape with ultraviolet radiation intense enough to sterilize most known life forms. As the galaxy's only evolved Deathworlders, the Drezak understand threats that you fortunately will never face. Vrask continued, allowing a hint of superiority to infuse his speech. It wasn't technically a diplomatic breach. The Drezak's unique evolutionary history was simple fact, not boasting. The Alari representative, a willowy being evolved in the gentle photosynthetic gardens of Alara Prime, raised a trembling appendage. With respect, Commander, while we value Drezak military technology, perhaps these vivid demonstrations of your homeworlds, extreme conditions aren't strictly necessary. Vrask's secondary eyelids flicked dismissively. Knowledge of what forged the Drezak is essential to understanding our defense systems. Our technology, like our biology, is a response to surviving conditions that would instantly kill most species represented here. He gestured to his aide, who advanced the display to show a Drezak hatchling emerging from its shell, already equipped with thermal resistance scales and redundant organ systems. From birth, we are designed to endure. Our youngest can survive atmospheric toxicity levels that would require your most advanced environmental suits. The chamber's subtle ventilation system couldn't quite eliminate the pheromones of discomfort permeating the air, a bouquet Vrask had come to savor during these presentations. The Drezak had long ago accepted their isolated position in galactic society, respected, feared, but never truly understood by species who evolved on worlds where survival wasn't a daily battle against the environment itself. Just as Vrask prepared to display the newest advancements in Drezak armor technology, designed to withstand direct plasma immersion, a commotion erupted at the chamber's entrance. Junior Communications Officer Thrak burst through the ceremonial doors, a violation of protocol so severe that Vrask's throat sac inflated with angry pheromones. "Forgive the interruption, Commander," Thrak said, lowering his head in submission while extending a data crystal with trembling claws. High Command ordered immediate delivery. The chamber fell silent as Vrask inserted the crystal into his wrist console. The message was encrypted with the highest security classification, something not used since the hive mind incursion a century ago. Vrask's expression remained impassive, decades of military discipline concealing the shock rippling through his system. An unknown vessel had approached Drezak space through the Crimson Belt. A radioactive asteroid field functioned as their territory's natural barrier. The ship had survived radiation levels that would reduce even Drezak vessels to molecularly compromised hulks without specialized shielding. More disturbing were the bioscan readings. The vessel contained organic life forms, not the silicon-based entities occasionally encountered in deep space, but carbon-based beings with cellular structures suggesting they required oxygen. Yet somehow they had survived conditions that should have been instantly fatal. "Commander," the Council Elder's voice broke through Vrask's momentary lapse. Vrask straightened to his full height, nearly 9 feet of armored muscle and evolutionary perfection. "The presentation is concluded. The Drezak delegation must withdraw on matters of imperial security." As murmurs swept through the chamber, Vrask gathered his aides with a single gesture. For the first time in his long career, uncertainty gnawed at him. Either the scanners were malfunctioning, unlikely given Drezak technical excellence, or something previously thought impossible had occurred. Someone else had survived the unsurvivable. The Talon of Kaldar emerged from hyperspace with its weapon systems fully charged, particle shields radiating a menacing crimson glow against the backdrop of the crimson belt swirling radioactive dust. Commander Vrask stood on the command deck, his reinforced spine rigid, as the view screen magnified the alien vessel. Curious design. Observe Sub-Commander Krall, Vrask's most trusted officer. No obvious weapons arrays. Minimal shielding. Yet it survived passage through the belt. The vessel, sleek and considerably smaller than the Drizak warship, displayed markings in an unfamiliar script. Its hull bore scorch marks and radiation scoring, yet its systems appeared fully functional. Biosigns, Vrask demanded. Confirmed, Commander. 27 organic entities. Their biological signatures are perplexing. Carbon-based, oxygen-dependent, yet radiating heat signatures suggesting an internal temperature that should denature their proteins. Vrask's inner eyelids flickered in the Drizak expression of deep thought. Establish communication. Prepare boarding protocols. Within moments, the alien vessel responded with audio-visual transmission. On screen appeared a creature that momentarily confounded Vrask's understanding. It stood upright on two limbs like many galactic species, but lacked any obvious evolutionary defenses. No scales, no carapace, no visible secondary limbs for combat. Its outer covering appeared to be artificial, conforming to a disturbingly soft-looking body. Greetings, the creature spoke, its translator rendering surprisingly precise Drizak speech patterns. I am Admiral Elena Chen of the Earth ship Pathfinder. We come in peace and seek diplomatic exchange. Commander Vrask of the Drizak Imperium, you have entered sovereign territory without authorization. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. The alien, this human, displayed a facial movement, pulling back its lips to reveal blunt teeth. Vrask's tactical officers tensed, interpreting it as an aggression display, but the creature's voice remained level. We understand and will comply. May we suggest using our docking bay? It's been calibrated to your ship's specifications. Vrask suppressed a hiss of surprise. They had anticipated the Drizak vessel's dimensions. Concerning. Hours later, as the specialized docking tunnel connected the ships, Vrask led his most elite guards into what had been designated as a neutral meeting chamber. The environmental systems had been adjusted to Drizak optimal conditions, a testament to the humans' research capabilities, or perhaps a calculated display of accommodation. Admiral Chen was smaller in person than the view screen had suggested, perhaps reaching Vrask's thoracic ridge at full height. 5 other humans flanked her, each wearing what appeared to be minimal protective gear, despite the crushing 1.8 g artificial gravity and caustic atmospheric mixture designed to make the Drizak comfortable. Commander, thank you for accepting our invitation, Chen said, executing a gesture that Vrask recognized as a formal Drizak greeting. Palm displayed, claws retracted. Except this creature had no claws to retract, only blunt, bizarrely articulated digits. Before Vrask could respond, Chen reached up and did something that caused his warrior escort to instinctively raise their weapons. She removed her breathing apparatus, exposing delicate respiratory openings to the hydrogen sulfide mixture permeating the chamber. I prefer to smell who I'm dealing with, she explained, inhaling deeply through what Vrask now identified as a scent organ protruding from her face. Fascinating biology, Commander. Your sulfur processing is even more efficient than our probe suggested. Krall swayed, his secondary heart accelerating in shock. Impossible, he whispered, before his regulatory system failed, and he collapsed to the deck. Chen frowned. Is your officer all right? Our briefings indicated this atmosphere was within Drizak comfort parameters. The atmosphere is not the issue, Vrask managed, fighting to maintain his diplomatic composure. Your survival in it is. A thunderous boom interrupted them as emergency klaxons blared. The deck lurched violently beneath them. Breach in Section 4. A Drizak security officer shouted. Explosive decompression. The humans moved with unexpected speed, their seemingly fragile bodies displaying reaction times rivaling Drzak combat reflexes. As atmosphere vented from the chamber and pressure alarms screamed, Vrask watched in disbelief as the humans continued functioning even as their exposed skin reddened and small blood vessels burst in their visual organs. While his soldiers reached for emergency breathing apparatus, one human, Lieutenant Okada, by the marking on his covering, moved purposefully toward a wounded Drzak guard. Instead of saving himself, the human removed his own protective gear and used components from it to seal the Drzak's pressure suit breach. "We mountain climbers call this the death zone," Chen remarked casually while helping to seal a bulkhead, her voice strained but functional despite the thinning atmosphere. 8,000 meters up on Earth, oxygen gets this thin. Not comfortable, but manageable for short periods. For the first time in his decorated military career, Commander Vrask found himself completely speechless. Dr. Silak pressed his face against the viewport of the empirical truth as the ship decelerated into Earth orbit. The xenobiologist had devoted his life to studying evolutionary adaptations to extreme environments, making him the natural choice to lead this unprecedented scientific expedition. Unlike Commander Vrask's military approach, Silak sought objective truth, and he was certain he would find it. These humans couldn't possibly have evolved on a true death world. "Preliminary atmospheric analysis complete," announced his assistant, Vextra. "Nitrogen-oxygen mixture with trace gases. Surprisingly hospitable." Silak's crest flattened in smug satisfaction. As expected, their physiological parameters suggested as much. They likely evolved on a colony world and simply adapted to space travel extremes through technology. The ship's sensors chimed as they began mapping surface conditions. "That cannot be correct," Vextra whispered, recalibrating the instruments. "The sensors must be malfunctioning." Silak moved to the console, his certainty wavering as data streamed across the screen. Earth's environment wasn't uniform. It was a chaotic patchwork of conditions that defied evolutionary logic. Regions where ambient temperature ranged from -89 degrees Celsius to 56 degrees Celsius. Areas with crushing atmospheric pressure 1,100 times Drzak standard alongside elevations with air so thin it triggered hypoxia warnings on their instruments. Radiation zones marked exclusion areas in human databanks where levels approached those of the Crimson Belt. How could one species adapt to such environmental variance? Vextra's voice trembled. No evolutionary pathway could account for this range. The human escort vessel hailed them, announcing their landing coordinates. Silak's scientific detachment crumbled when he realized their destination: Challenger Deep Research Station. Hours later, as their specialized submersible descended into an oceanic trench, Silak fought rising panic. Around them, water, deadly, corrosive, pressure-magnifying water, pressed with force sufficient to implode their craft without the phase shield technology. The Drzak evolved on a world where open liquid was highly acidic. Their instinctive fear of immersion was encoded at the genetic level. 7 miles below sea level, announced their human guide, Dr. Reeves, with inexplicable enthusiasm. "We vacation down here. The biodiversity is extraordinary." "Vacation," stammered Vextra. "Recreation. For enjoyment," Reeves clarified, not understanding the cultural disconnect. "Though this particular station is primarily for research, we maintain 6 major deep ocean facilities." A Drzak technician whispered a blasphemy against the war god Kalvash. Their submersible docked with an underwater complex where humans moved about with casual disregard for the crushing death, mere inches away behind reinforced viewports. Children, actual human young, pressed faces against the glass to watch exotic fish swimming in the abyssal darkness. "You bring your offspring here." Silak couldn't contain his horror. Reeves looked puzzled. "Our education program brings school groups through regularly. Kids love it." Before Silak could process this madness, an alert came through. The second Drzak research team, dispatched to Earth's mountainous regions, requested emergency evacuation. Their environmental suits had failed in conditions they hadn't anticipated. Not extreme heat or cold, but something called altitude sickness that their biology had no frame of reference for. "We'd better get you to Mount Everest Base Camp," Reeves said, checking the alert. "Fortunately, there's a hypersonic transport leaving in 20 minutes. We'll be there in under an hour." Silac stared uncomprehending as Reeves calmly explained they would travel from crushing ocean depths to oxygen-starved mountain heights, a journey between completely opposite environmental extremes, in less time than it took to complete a Drzak dietary cycle. The research submersible descended toward the surface, and Silac found himself clutching his religious amulet. For the first time, he questioned whether Kulvash had truly tested the Drzak with the harshest of worlds, or if the god of evolution had reserved that honor for another species entirely. The elaborate reception hall in Geneva fell silent as emergency protocols overrode the Earth-Drzak diplomatic celebration. Holographic displays flickered to life, cutting through the carefully maintained atmosphere that had been adjusted to accommodate both species' respiratory preferences. "Distress signal authenticated," announced the AI system. "Origin, Harmonic Synthesis Research Station, Verastus Orbit." Admiral Chen's celebratory expression vanished as the message played. A fragmented transmission showing Dr. Helen Park, the station's lead xenobiologist, her face illuminated by emergency lighting. "Vex incursion. Containment breached. 17 personnel. Quarantine protocols." The transmission ended with a burst of static. "The Vex," Commander Vrask hissed, his scales flushing with heat patterns that his warriors instantly recognized as battle readiness. "They would not risk attacking a facility with human presence unless they've identified us as a threat," Chen finished. "How much do you know about them, Commander?" "Enough to fear their strategic calculus," Vrask replied. "The collective has expanded through 3 sectors in the past decade. They operate through biological proxies, engineered drone bodies controlled by a distributed machine intelligence. The diplomatic pleasantries evaporated as military personnel from both species congregated around tactical displays. Verastus, an unstable brown dwarf on the edge of contested space, hosted the joint research station investigating evolutionary convergence between humans and Drzak. Its extreme radiation and gravity fluctuations had been considered natural protection against interference. "Rescue options," Chen demanded of her staff. "Minimal, Admiral," responded Captain Marcos Rivera, a compact man whose dark eyes reflected the emergency lighting. "Verastus is surrounded by gravimetric distortions that will tear apart anything larger than a Corvette-class vessel. The research station was supplied by specially shielded shuttles." "Then we need a small team," Vrask declared. "I volunteer to lead the Drzak contingent." Rivera stepped forward. "I'll command the human element." Chen and Vrask exchanged glances. Both recognized Rivera's qualifications, veteran of Earth's resource wars, with extensive environmental adaptation implants, but also the potential problems of a joint command. "The Shadow Reach can be prepared for departure within 6 hours, Vrask stated. "It's our most advanced stealth vessel." Rivera nodded. "My team will gather necessary equipment." "What equipment?" challenged Shar, Vrask's combat specialist. "Our vessel contains everything required for survival." "With respect," Rivera countered, "your equipment is calibrated for Drzak biology. We have different requirements. We have sufficient compression suits to accommodate your physiological weaknesses," Shar insisted, a dismissive flick of his tail betraying his contempt. Rivera didn't flinch. "It's not about protection. It's about capability." He activated his wrist display, projecting the schematics for equipment that caused murmurs among the Drzak scientific advisors. Adaptive thermal regulation units, radiation catalyzing nutrient processors. Dr. Silac, newly returned from Earth, leaned forward in fascination. "You're bringing terraforming equipment." "Micro-scale environmental modification," Rivera corrected. Sometimes changing yourself isn't enough. You need to change what's around you. Vrask's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of intense calculation. The Vex will detect such power signatures. Not if we use your biological stealth adaptations to mask them, Rivera replied. We've studied your dermal absorption capabilities. We can integrate our technologies. A tense silence followed as the implications became clear. This wasn't just a rescue mission, but the first true test of whether human and Drezak methodologies could function together. 6 hours, Vrask finally confirmed. Gather your people, Captain. As the joint team dispersed to prepare, intelligence analysts delivered their preliminary assessment. The Vex had deployed specialized hunter-killer units in Verestus radiation belt, programmed specifically to target Drezak biology. They don't know about us yet, Rivera observed, studying the data. Their sensors are calibrated for your biochemical signatures, not ours. A slow predatory expression spread across Vrask's face, the closest approximation to a human smile his physiology allowed. Then perhaps, Captain, your species' presence might offer a tactical advantage none of us anticipated. For the first time since their species encounter, a flicker of genuine respect passed between them. The Shadow Reach tumbled through Verestus's outer atmosphere, its stealth systems failing as gravitational shear tore through the hull's integrity field. Warning klaxons blared in multiple harmonic ranges, some audible only to Drezak hearing, others calibrated for human perception. Primary stabilizers offline. Lieutenant Kazan shouted over the cacophony. Secondary systems at 12% capacity. Rivera braced against a bulkhead as the ship lurched violently. Can we reach Verestus 3? If by reach you mean crash upon. Vrask replied, his talons digging into the command console as he fought to maintain control. Then yes, we can reach it. The view screen displayed their rapidly approaching destination, a methane-rich moon with swirling yellow-green clouds and scattered archipelagos of black silicate formations jutting from seas of liquid ammonia. Brace for impact. Vrask roared as the ship plummeted through the caustic atmosphere, friction heating the outer hull to temperatures that triggered emergency cooling protocols. The crash sent Rivera slamming against the pressure door, the impact so severe that his enhanced skeletal reinforcements audibly creaked. Around him, Drezak crew members were thrown about despite their natural density and reinforced musculature. The lights flickered, died, and emergency illumination bathed the command deck in a ghostly blue glow. Status report, Vrask demanded, already upright and assessing damage while human crew members were still regaining their footing. Tech specialist Yusuf Rahman coughed, wiping caustic fluid from a cut on his forehead. Hull breached in 6 locations, atmosphere mixing with the moon's methane ammonia composite. Life support at critical levels. Containment fields. Vrask asked. Failing. We have perhaps 20 minutes before the ship's atmosphere is completely compromised. Rivera pulled himself up, ignoring the stabbing pain in his side where at least 2 ribs had fractured. We need to retrieve our environmental gear. Now. The situation degraded rapidly as they salvaged what they could from the crippled vessel. Outside, Verestus 3 presented challenges more extreme than either species had anticipated. The moon's atmosphere corroded exposed human skin on contact, causing painful chemical burns that required immediate treatment with countermeasures. For the Drezak, the caustic elements merely caused mild irritation, but the temperature fluctuations as the moon rotated toward its night cycle threatened even their legendary thermal regulation. The shuttle bay has completely separated from the main hull, Lieutenant Shaw reported, returning from his scouting mission. No possibility of repair or launch. So we're stranded, Rahman stated, adjusting his breathing apparatus as thin rivulets of blood traced paths from his nostrils, the first sign of methane poisoning despite the filtration system. For now, Rivera replied, spreading out a topographical scan on a portable holographic projector. The research station is approximately 86 kilometers in that direction. He pointed toward a distant ridge of crystalline formations barely visible through the swirling atmosphere. 86 kilometers through terrain that will kill your species on contact, Vrask observed, his tone factual rather than mocking. And temperature extremes that will shut down your neural systems during the night cycle, Rivera countered. Looks like we both have problems. The two leaders stared at each other across the makeshift camp they'd established in the shadow of the wrecked vessel. Then, unexpectedly, Vrask extended a taloned hand in what he'd learned was a human gesture. Then we solved them together. Raman stumbled suddenly, dropping an oxygen converter he'd been repairing. As he instinctively reached to catch it, his hand became trapped between the device and a jagged metal support beam. The humans winced at the audible snap of bone. The Drizak watched in confusion as Raman, instead of vocalizing pain or seeking immediate medical attention, calmly used his other hand to retrieve a small tool, deliberately dislocated his own thumb, extracted his damaged hand, and then continued working on the crucial oxygen converter. Does your species not experience pain? Shor asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. We feel it, Raman replied through gritted teeth as he injected a local anesthetic. We just decide sometimes that other things matter more. As darkness began to fall, the temperature plummeted with terrifying speed, dropping nearly 50 degrees in under an hour. The Drizak warriors, despite their evolutionary adaptations, began to move sluggishly as their metabolism struggled to compensate. Rivera activated the thermal regulation units they'd salvaged, creating a microclimate that protected both species from the worst of the cold. The Drizak observed with new respect as the humans organized a continuous watch rotation, their bodies somehow able to function without the hibernation cycles that Drizak physiology demanded during extreme temperature stress. How long can your kind remain vigilant? Vrask asked as Rivera checked the perimeter for the third time. As long as necessary, Rivera answered simply. We can go about 72 hours before serious cognitive impairment. Sleep is negotiable in survival situations. For the first time since the crash, Vrask's expression showed something beyond tactical calculation. It might have been respect. A crystalline cave network provided shelter from the radiation storm that swept across Verestus III's tortured landscape. The luminescent minerals embedded in the walls cast an eerie blue-green glow, illuminating the unlikely pair of leaders who had retreated inside while their teams secured the perimeter. Commander Vrask pressed a thermal regulator against his neck ridge, fighting the metabolic shutdown that threatened to overtake his system. 5 days of trekking through the moon's hostile terrain had pushed even his legendary physiology to its limits. Your condition is deteriorating, Rivera observed, adjusting the portable atmospheric processor that kept the methane levels tolerable for human respiration. A temporary inefficiency, Vrask replied stiffly. Drizak biology will compensate. Rivera passed him a vial of synthesized enzyme stabilizer. This might help. We developed it based on Dr. Silek's research into your thermal regulation system. Vrask hesitated, then accepted the offering. As the compound took effect, bringing blessed relief to his overworked systems, the rigid formality that had characterized their interactions softened fractionally. We would not have survived the silicon parasites without your people's intervention, Vrask acknowledged, referencing the crystalline life forms that had swarmed their camp during the third night cycle. And we'd be corroded husks without your warriors' ability to wade through that ammonia sea, Rivera countered. Turns out we're both useful. A comfortable silence settled between them as the radiation storm intensified outside, battering the moon's surface with particles energetic enough to scramble unshielded neural tissue. May I ask a personal question, Captain? Vrask finally ventured, one warrior to another. Rivera nodded. Why do humans push themselves toward ever more extreme environments? Your species could survive comfortably in regulated conditions, yet you voluntarily subject yourselves to deadly pressures, temperatures, altitudes. The evolutionary logic escapes me. Rivera considered the question carefully. How much do you know about Drizak religious doctrine? I am well versed in the teachings of Calvash, Vrask replied, surprised at the change in subject. Then perhaps we can find understanding through comparison, Rivera suggested. What does your doctrine teach about the creation of your species? Vrask's inner eyelids flicked thoughtfully. Kalvash, the war god, placed our ancestors on Kaldar as a test. Those who survived proved worthy of his blessing. Evolved strength, redundant organs, thermal resistance, each adaptation a divine reward for enduring the trial. A powerful myth, Rivera observed, and one that explains much about Drizak culture. It is not myth, Vrask bristled. It is historical truth. Rivera nodded respectfully. Among humans, we have countless creation stories. But our scientific understanding tells us something different about Earth, something I've been reluctant to share until now. Continue. Vrask encouraged, curiosity overriding caution. Earth wasn't always a death world, Rivera said quietly. At least, not entirely. It contained harsh environments, yes, but also paradises. The extreme conditions that shaped human adaptability. We created many of them ourselves. Vrask's expression revealed his confusion. You damaged your own world. Through warfare, industrial pollution, radiation experiments, climate manipulation. Rivera's face hardened. For thousands of years, human civilization made Earth progressively more hostile to human life. Not deliberately, not initially, but persistently. The implications struck Vrask with almost physical force. You evolved in response to self-created threats. A feedback loop of adaptation and destruction, Rivera confirmed. We didn't just survive our death world. We unintentionally engineered it, forcing ourselves to adapt to increasingly impossible conditions or perish. Our adaptability isn't divine gift, Commander. It's the product of relentless evolutionary pressure, much of it self-inflicted. Vrask sat motionless, his entire theological framework shuddering under this revelation. No Drizak would ever deliberately damage Kaldar's already precarious balance. The concept violated every sacred principle. This explains, he finally said, why humans approach survival differently. You don't seek to preserve environmental stability. We assume instability as the baseline, Rivera finished, and develop 1,000 different approaches rather than a single perfect solution. Their philosophical reckoning was interrupted by an urgent signal from the team's seismic sensors. Rivera activated the portable display, revealing unusual energy patterns emanating from beneath the research station, now visible in the distance. Those readings, Vrask hissed, scales brightening in alarm. They're consistent with core destabilization technology. They're not just holding hostages, Rivera realized. They're weaponizing the entire moon. The research station loomed before them, its once gleaming exterior now marred by Vex modifications, organic-looking protrusions that pulsed with sickly green energy. The joint rescue team crouched behind a ridge of crystalline formations, studying the facility through specialized optics. 3 external sensor arrays, Shar reported. Automated defense turrets calibrated to Drizak biological signatures. 2 primary entrances, both sealed with biometric locks. And the drilling apparatus? Vrask demanded. Raman adjusted his scanner. Penetrating approximately 12 kilometers into the moon's mantle. Energy readings suggest they're targeting the unstable magma pocket beneath this tectonic plate. Time estimate? Rivera asked. 6 hours before critical destabilization, Raman replied grimly. After that, the chain reaction becomes irreversible. The makeshift explosives they'd assembled from Shadow Reach wreckage detonated against the station's rear maintenance hatch. Instead of breaching the entrance as planned, the blast merely scorched the reinforced door, triggering alarm systems that sent Vex sentries scuttling from defensive positions. Adaptive metallurgy, Rivera cursed. They've upgraded the standard containment protocols. Retreat, Vrask ordered as targeting systems locked onto their position. The team fell back to their secondary position, narrowly avoiding concentrated plasma fire that melted silicate formations into bubbling pools. We need another approach, Rivera stated as they regrouped in a natural trench 300 meters from the facility. A faint, irregular pattern of light flashes from a research station viewport caught Raman's attention. "That's Morse code," he exclaimed, adjusting his optics. "Old Earth communication system. Someone inside is signaling us." Deciphered, the message revealed a shocking development. Dr. Helen Park, one of the human xenobiologists, had created a rudimentary communication channel through the station's waste disposal system. Within the hour, they established limited contact. Systematically dissecting captives, Park's broken transmission explained. Both species, mapping biological adaptations, creating hybrid proxies, combining Drizak durability with human adaptability. The team exchanged grim looks as the implications became clear. "The Vex aren't just studying us," Vrask concluded. "They're weaponizing our combined evolutionary advantages, while using the moon itself as a testing ground," Rivera added. "Once they've extracted what they need from the prisoners, the core destabilization will eliminate all evidence and provide data on how their new hybrid proxies perform during planetary collapse." The integrated rescue team gathered around a three-dimensional projection of the facility. Every conventional entry point was heavily defended, every standard protocol anticipated by the Vex's predictive algorithms. "Direct assault is impossible," Shar declared, frustration evident in his voice. "Even with combined tactics, we cannot breach their defenses before the drilling reaches critical depth." Rivera studied the geological scan, an idea forming that went against every Drizak tactical doctrine. "What if we don't try to enter the facility?" he suggested slowly, "but instead force the facility to come to us?" "Explain," Vrask demanded. "We trigger a controlled partial collapse of the moon's crust beneath the southern quadrant, just enough to compromise their foundation without initiating full destabilization." The Drizak warriors recoiled at the suggestion. Their entire evolutionary psychology was built around preserving stability in hostile environments, not deliberately increasing chaos. "Impossible," Shar protested. "The variables are too numerous, the risk of catastrophic failure too high." "It's exactly what the Vex won't expect," Rivera countered. "Their algorithms predict we'll try to minimize environmental disruption, not weaponize it." The standoff between approaches seemed insurmountable until Vrask, remembering Rivera's revelation about human-engineered environmental pressures, made an unprecedented decision. "We will attempt Captain Rivera's strategy," he announced, silencing objections from his team with a decisive gesture. Sometimes survival requires embracing destruction rather than resisting it. The operation proceeded with remarkable synergy. Drizak warriors placing precisely calculated charges at structural weak points identified by human geological analysis. When the controlled detonation sequence initiated, the research station's southern quadrant sank precisely 2.7 meters, creating structural failures exactly where predicted. The breach wasn't elegant. A jagged tear in the facility's underside where foundation supports had separated from the main structure, but it was undefended by Vex security protocols. As they infiltrated the darkened sublevel, the first wave of Vex proxy drones attacked. The site froze both humans and Drizak momentarily. The constructs possessed unmistakable elements of both species, Drizak-like armored plating covering bodies with human-like flexibility and proportions. Their eyes, glowing with artificial intelligence, displayed recognition of both their evolutionary sources. "Abominations," Vrask snarled, firing his plasma disruptor. In the ensuing battle, the complementary strengths of the rescue team proved devastatingly effective against even these hybrid creations. Drizak warriors absorbed punishment that would have instantly killed humans, while human operatives executed tactical maneuvers that Drizak physiology couldn't match. When they finally breached the main laboratory and confronted the Vex Prime consciousness, a pulsating biomechanical node that coordinated the entire operation, its synthetic voice conveyed something none of them had anticipated: fear. Evolutionary convergence probability 0.3%. It intoned as they disabled its connection to the drilling apparatus. Cooperative integration of disparate adaptation mechanisms. Unanticipated. Threat assessment Terminal. The Galactic Council Chamber had never held such a diverse assembly. Representatives from over 400 species filled every tier, with emergency accommodations hastily constructed to handle the unprecedented attendance. Rumors of what transpired at Verastus had spread across 17 sectors, compelling even historically isolationist civilizations to send observers. The central podium, traditionally occupied by a single speaker, had been modified. Commander Vrask stood alongside Admiral Chen, their physical differences striking under the chamber's illumination. Behind them, arranged in an integrated formation that deliberately intermixed both species, stood the survivors of the Verastus mission. Elder Diplomat Sorax, oldest member of the council, activated the ceremonial chime. The emergency session recognizes Commander Vrask of the Drezak Imperium and Admiral Chen of Earth. Vrask stepped forward, his movements lacking the intimidating posture he had cultivated during previous council appearances. The data crystal he inserted into the central console triggered a holographic display that filled the chamber's vast dome. For 9 generations, Vrask began, the Drezak have claimed the distinction of being the galaxy's sole evolved Deathworlders. Today, I formally withdraw that claim. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as comparative environmental data materialized above them. Kaldar's metrics displayed alongside Earth's. Even those who had heard rumors gasped at the stark evidence. The Drezak mastered a single hell, Vrask continued, each word carefully measured. Humans adapted to 1,000 different ones. Where we specialized, they generalized. Where we optimized for specific conditions, they developed unprecedented environmental flexibility. The display shifted to footage from the Verastus mission, human and Drezak personnel functioning together in conditions that should have been fatal to both. But I come not merely to acknowledge another Deathworld species, Vrask announced. I come to challenge our fundamental understanding of evolutionary success. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The Vex Collective identified something that both our species missed. They recognized that specialization and adaptability, when combined, create something greater than either alone. The hologram displayed the dissected Vex proxy drones, the horrific yet undeniably effective amalgamation of Drezak and human biological principles. The Vex sought to weaponize our complementary adaptations, Chen explained. We propose instead to integrate them cooperatively. Vrask gestured, and Dr. Silak joined them at the podium, carrying a sealed container that radiated soft bioluminescence. This compound, Silak explained, synthesized from Drezak biochemistry, allows human cellular structures to process atmospheric toxins at 400% increased efficiency. Without warning, Vrask reached up and deactivated his atmospheric stabilizer, the device no Drezak had ever willingly disconnected outside their homeworld. Simultaneously, Shen pressed an injector against her neck, administering the compound Silak had presented. The assembly watched in stunned silence as both continued breathing, normally in an atmosphere that should have compromised both species. Vrask's scales displayed no signs of oxygen toxicity, while Chen showed no symptoms of respiratory distress from the trace gases that were standard in council atmosphere. We stand before you today, Vrask declared, not as representatives of competing evolutionary paths, but as evidence that diversity of adaptation creates resilience that uniformity cannot match. The display changed again, showing 17 previously unremarkable species reclassified under a new designation, environmental specialists. The Ardani evolved in perpetual darkness, Chen explained, indicating an arachnoid species from a tidally locked world. The Melosians adapted to atmospheric pressure 90 times council standard. Neither qualified as Deathworlders under previous metrics, yet each mastered environmental extremes beyond what either humans or Drezak could tolerate. We propose, Vrask announced, the formation of the Deathworlder Defense Initiative, a cooperative body that recognizes specialized environmental adaptations as evolutionary advantages rather than liabilities. As the presentation concluded, Dr. Silak approached a group of young human scientists with a formal gesture of academic collaboration. The significance wasn't lost on the assembly. Drezek xenobiologists, once the most isolationist researchers in known space, actively seeking knowledge exchange. In the chamber's diplomatic anteroom, away from public scrutiny, Vrask extended his hand toward Rivera in the human gesture of partnership. The captain took it without hesitation, their grip firm despite their physiological differences. "Your Earth expression," Vrask said quietly, "about necessity and invention. I believe I understand it now. And I understand why the Drezek value stability so highly," Rivera replied. "Different paths, same destination. Perhaps," Vrask observed, watching through the viewport as Drezek and human diplomatic teams mingled with representatives from newly recognized specialist species. "We were never meant to be the galaxy's only Deathworlders." "Maybe nobody was," Rivera suggested. "Maybe the real evolutionary advantage isn't surviving hell, but learning from those who survived different hells," Vrask finished, attempting his first human smile.